So I thought I should make a video explaining how to set your XLX2 settings for your car. I already had this dialed in like about a couple minutes ago, but I decided why not just make the video because it's difficult and it does take a lot of time and patience and hopefully not some crashes to understand. So let's get to the next step. Okay, so we have our laptop. Let me just log in. We got that. We got our Castle Link 3.85.01. Whatever the newest version is fine. I know there's some tricks using some of the older versions to bypass some settings, but I'm not going to get into that in this video. So the first thing you want to do is you go to Basic and you turn off cutoff voltage so that when the voltage of the batteries dip, you don't have a cutoff on the controller. This is for speed runs. You normally want a cutoff to be on the safe side, but you go with no cutoff. And for my cars, I run without reverse. It's just an old school thing so that you don't go crashing when you reverse it when you do your U-turn. And then I run Futaba equipment that's capable of 7.5 volts. So I set for 7.5 volts. I have the brake amount a little bit high for the moment because it's a 4070 on a 7 scale car. So it's not going to have that torque to slow down as much. So after the first couple test passes, you want to adjust your brake amount so that it best fits the car without the tires locking up. So I have it set at 50%, and I have my drag brake set at 20% with a slow brake ramp. And what that does is when you let go of the throttle, the car will start slowing down on its own, which kind of helps avoid having to slam on the brakes. So next up is power, and for power, I have it set to medium startup because the motor's not cogging, it's not having cogging issues, and I have the max power set to 100%. However, you might want to adjust this if the car's cutting out, doing excessive cutouts like my VT2 Demon Child. So you could set that lower and avoid the cutout. And like I said in my previous portion, I don't have any reverse, so I'm just going to leave this at 40%. That's what it was on the the Bumblebee Revo 2.0. And punch control is interesting. It's kind of like traction control, and if you have it set to 100%, it's going to be the slowest to ramp up to full throttle. So that comes in pretty handy for speed runs. I like to have all the power available to me at all times, and then just use better throttle control. So I keep it at 0%, so disabled. Now here's advanced. Usually you don't have to touch this at all unless your remote is very finicky about your controller input, the signal input. So we're going to keep that as is, and we're going to go to motor. And now motor direction, this is very important for setups like mine, where if your wires are set so that you can't really reverse them or modify them, you can use the motor direction to reverse it. So I had my Futaba bind it with the reverse channel because normally you want to do that for Castle controllers, is you set the throttle on reverse and calibrate it. And I found that it was reverse, and then I switched it back to normal. So normal is usually fine, but like I said, it depends on how your wiring is. Now sensorless motor timing is the fine-tuning component of the XLX2. It's basically what gives you a higher RPM if you're not able to hit as much RPM. And this is how you can kind of trick your controller into using more power. So with a limited setup without changing the motor out, this is how you finally adjust. And it's very similar to timing advance on a real car. The more timing you have, the more power you're going to consume, but you're going to go faster, but there's a chance of grenading. So as a start off point, I set this to 0, and the factory is 10%. So 10% timing is usually a little bit too much for D-wind motors like the TP motors. So you want to set this to 0 and use gearing to your advantage rather than timing. Next up is throttle curve. Now this from the factory is a linear curve. The reason I have mine curved up at the top is because I'm kind of a wuss when it comes to going full throttle, and I usually take too long to get to full throttle. So what I do is I keep the throttle curve a little bit curved at the top so that it's kind of mimicking me getting the full throttle faster. And this does make driving it a lot more touchy, but I find that if you're new to speed runs, this might be a good method to keep your throttle up to get higher speeds. And same with the brake curve. I have it so it's like an exponential curve at the top so that I get to the most portion of the brake and then it tapers off so that it takes longer to get to full braking force. And last but not least, there's logging. So for logging, for a speed run setup, you want to set it so that it's 10 samples per second so that you have the most accurate graph. It's going to fill up the log a lot faster. Like this is about 30 seconds of running and it's already at 7% full. But I find that it gives me much more accurate information to go off of and adjust gearing as I go along.